Hey, Bible nerds, this is Dr. Manny Arango. Welcome to the Bible Department podcast powered by Arma. We are walking through the entire Bible in a year. You can go to the description or thebibledepartment.com to download a reading plan and join the journey. Family, welcome to day 336 here on the Bible Department podcast. We are diving into a brand new book of the Bible. We are in the book of Esther today, and I assume that most people are familiar with the story of Esther, with the book of Esther. And so my goal is to put this book into context, to highlight some details that maybe you missed when you were in Sunday school. Okay, so today we've got Esther chapters 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't done the reading, I'm going to challenge you. Stop the video, pause the audio, and go get the reading done, okay? 3 short chapters of the Bible and narrative-based chapters of the Bible. So this is story. So I feel like, sometimes just narrative just reads easier, So not a lot of chapters to read, not a long reading today. Pretty easy reading. You're reading a story. It's awesome. All right, like every day here on the podcast, I'm going to start out with context clues. And typically, when we're diving into a book for the first time, the context typically takes up the majority of the episode. So buckle up. Got a lot of context to give you, not just for Esther chapters 1, 2, and 3, but for the book of Esther as a whole. So we're in Esther for 3 days, okay? Day 336, 337, and 338 of this podcast, of this Bible reading plan. And so today will probably be heavy on context clues and light on everything else. But then the other days will probably be light on context clues, heavy on everything else. So just want to give you a heads up. All right, let's dive into context. Number one, this book is post-exilic. Now, we are about to go pretty far into the future. And then I want to orient you or kind of help brace you for the whiplash, because we're going to go into the future and then we're going to come back. What's going to happen once we get to books like Ezra and Nehemiah, we're going to have to come back. So Esther, maybe one of these years we'll do the Bible reading plan chronologically, because I think that's also helpful. If you've ever read the chronological Bible, it can be really, really, really helpful. Our Bible reading plan just isn't structured that way. It's structured based on how Jews encounter the Hebrew Bible, aka the Old Testament. So, anywho, we're about to jump, 100 years, essentially after Ezra and Nehemiah. And then, when we get to Ezra and Nehemiah, we're gonna have to come back in time. So, just want to help you get oriented. So this is post-exile. This is roughly 100 years after the Jews are allowed to return to Jerusalem. So remember, Jews are exiled to Babylon. The Persian Empire defeats the Babylonian Empire, and then the Jews are allowed to go back to wherever they come from, and other groups too. They, instead of living in deportation, they can go back to their homeland. And so the Jews are just one of many ethnic groups that are allowed to go back to Jerusalem, okay? But not everyone takes, the Persians up on that offer. Some people, it's they've built homes, they've planted vineyards, they've established life. And so a bunch of people do remain in the Persian Empire, okay? So this story is a story of Esther and her uncle Mordecai, who didn't go back, okay, with Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, they didn't go back to Jerusalem once the deportation was over. They stayed, okay, as foreigners in the Persian kingdom. Okay, so there we go. I just want to give you context for that. Next, the villain in the story, his name is Haman, and he's going to use dice to decide the day where they're going to kill all the Jews. Those dice are called pur, okay? Pur. And so because God, through Mordecai and Esther, are able to overthrow the wicked plan of Haman, the festival to celebrate the fact that all the Jews didn't, get systematically killed off is going to get called Purim. Purim. Okay, so it's based on those dice. that Haman was using to base the date of their execution. And so this is a story of reversals. Okay. So also, the book of Esther is the background for the festival of Purim. Okay. Purim. It's why do Jews celebrate the festival of Purim? Well, this story found here in Esther is actually going to give the answer for why Jews celebrate this festival. Okay. Still a festival that Jews celebrate today. Now, I've been to enough like Jewish events and festivals to know that it's very common for Jewish people to say things like Haman, who's obviously the villain in this story in Esther, is the first Hitler. Haman is the first Hitler. Okay. So, in terms of leaders, government leaders that want to systematically destroy, exterminate, or kill off the Jewish people, this is a biblical story of a political leader who wants to, get rid of an entire ethnic group. Okay. So that's not just a modern problem. This is an ancient issue. Okay. Purim. The word for the systematic elimination of Jews throughout history, that word is called pogrom. Okay. Pogrom. And this story here in Esther is considered the first pogrom. The next thing that is important to know in terms of context is that we don't know who the author of the book of Esther is. A lot of people may think maybe it's Mordecai. Other people think it's the group of 70 Jewish elders. Okay. There really is no clear, definite answer for who the author is. So we're going to just go ahead and say unknown author. So in terms of context, we know the time frame in which this book would have taken place, but we don't necessarily know when it was written. We know when the events are happening, but not when it is written or who writes it. Next thing you need to know, if you've seen the movie 300, then you are literally like historically acclimated to what's happening in the book of Esther, because that king Xerxes that is depicted in the movie 300, that would have been the man that Esther is going to marry here in Esther chapter 2. Not only that, but it is the collision or the clash or the war, the battle with the Greek city-states that is depicted in the movie 300 that they are preparing for in Esther chapter 1. Okay, so in Esther chapter 1, they are about to go to war with the Spartans, okay, or Sparta, okay, like they're about to like go to war with them. They lose, which is depicted in the movie 300, and then Xerxes and the Persian army comes back to the capital, the administrative capital of Persia, and regroup, okay? Now, when they come back to regroup, that is when we get to Esther chapter 2. So what many people don't realize is that there are 4 years in between Esther chapter 1 and Esther chapter 2. So just want to like orient us around that. Maybe it's a good excuse to go watch the movie 300. And I know in the movie 300, the Persians are the villains in that story, but just from a historical perspective, it's good to just get your mind wrapped around like, oh, got it. Like these are the Persians. Like this is the Persian kingdom. This is the Persian Empire. Eventually, a man by the name of Alexander the Great is going to overthrow the Persian Empire. And that's when we're going to get essentially that changing of the guard. And just so that everyone kind of understands, the Assyrian Empire kind of ran the show, okay, in the ancient Near East. And then the Babylonian Empire overthrew the Assyrian Empire, like swallowed it up, took all the land and all the assets. And then the Babylonian Empire came and swallowed them up. Okay, no, sorry. Assyrian Empire, Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire, Greek, and then Roman. Okay, so these empires are just kind of like, these empires are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's because they are conquering the next biggest empire, if that makes sense. All right, so think 300. Next, this is going to get into our first nerdy nuggets. Okay, so that's all the historical context you need. Okay, next, let's dive into our nerdy nuggets for the day. Family, the wait is over. My brand new book, Crushing Chaos, is out. now and available everywhere books are sold. Literally today, I walked into a Barnes & Noble and I signed a bunch of copies at a physical location. So you can grab this book at a physical Barnes & Noble, or you can go to a Books A Million or Amazon or anywhere books are sold and grab a copy. If you enjoy reading the Bible from an ancient perspective, if you understand that the beauty of Scripture is actually knowing it in context, then you'll love this book. And if there's any chaos in your personal life, I think that reading the Bible from an ancient perspective can actually help to crush the chaos in your life. I think this book is going to be a New York Times bestseller. I really do. I think we wrote a good one. I think you should get a copy today. All right, back to the episode. First nerdy nugget. God is not mentioned in the book. One of the things you're going to realize, or maybe you already have realized after reading, is that God is not mentioned. This is going to get us into our timeless truth later, so I won't say anything else about that. But you may have realized, like, the absence of God's name, of any mentions about him. In a real sense, Yahweh is pretty, quote unquote, absent, okay, throughout the entire book. Okay, second thing that you need to realize is that the characters are really morally compromised. Like, number one, they're marrying foreigners. Literally, Esther is marrying a whole pagan, okay? Number two, they're drinking alcohol and like eating non-kosher food and very, very comfortable being mixed in with pagan, idol-worshiping, non-Jewish folks, Gentiles. If you were to take a book like Daniel and kind of contrast the book of Daniel with the book of Esther, you'd realize that Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are like in of themselves, like those four boys are a contrast community to the wider Babylonian culture. They won't eat the king's food. They won't drink the king's wine. They just are conducting themselves in a very sacred way that it is a clear, like, we live a different lifestyle than y'all. Whereas once you get to the book of Esther, there is none of that. Like, these folks, Mordecai and Esther, are not like the billboards for cultural holiness or not blending in or being in the world but not of it. They are very much so in it and of it and drinking and partying and being married to pagans and all of it. Okay, so in a real way, the book of Esther is a story of God's grace, because at no point does Yahweh say, well, you haven't kept kosher enough, I'm not going to rescue you. Or, y'all been drinking, I'm not going to rescue you. No, actually, one of the themes of the book is how Persian is too Persian, how Greek is too Greek, how Roman is too Roman, aka how secular is too secular. This is an issue that we're going to deal with not just in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. Everyone around Jesus's world would have been asking how Greek is too Greek, how Roman is too Roman, how secular is too secular. That's also a question that Christians are asking today, that all religious people really wrestle with. Where's the line of compromise? But also, where's the line of, like, relevant? How can you witness to a world that you have no relationship with? And Yahweh essentially is going to act on Mordecai and Esther's behalf, even though they're pretty entangled or they're pretty enmeshed with the secular world around them. And so we're going to get a pretty anti-legalistic approach here. I would say that the thing that's highlighted in the text is not the holiness or the separateness of Mordecai and Esther, but the grace of God, despite their lack of holiness and cultural separation or distinction or distinctiveness. All right, the story starts out, okay, Xerxes wants to parade his wife, Vashti. I'm just going to kind of read this because I think that's the best thing to do in the interest of time. First paragraph of the book highlights the immense wealth of the Persian Empire. The empires we have become used to in the biblical story, Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, are not anywhere near the level of Persia. The Persian Empire was the first true world empire with its territory in 3 continents. Its wealth was beyond the imagination of the pharaohs, of Tiglath-Pileser, of Ashurbanipal, of Nebuchadnezzar. The world had simply never seen anything like this before, and this wealth is reflected in the description of the 7-day banquet that ended the invasion planning. Okay, they're planning to invade the Greek city-states. Okay, at the end of this 7-day long party, Vashti refuses to parade before the kings and his nobles. This results in her being deposed and a law sent out for husbands in the empire to be given more honor and power over their wives, which is insanely ironic. Okay, as this is a story of a wife, aka Esther, gaining power and getting her husband to do what she wants through the use of banquets. Okay? So, man, we've got Vashti's refusal to do what, Xerxes wants at a banquet. And then Esther's literally going to use banquets to get Xerxes to do what she wants done. And in a world where women are legally given less power, Esther's going to have more power, which that's a whole other timeless truth in and of itself, but we won't get there. We won't go there right now. Chapter 2, verse 1 starts with these words: after these things. The events of Esther's rise take place 4 years after that initial banquet. We know this from chapter 2, verse 16, when Esther is taken to Xerxes in the 7th year of his reign. The banquet in chapter 1 took place in the 3rd year of his reign. That's chapter 1, verse 3, which means the war with the Greek city-states took place in between these chapters, chapters 1 and 2. This gives us a new perspective on Xerxes, his character in the book of Esther. This is a defeated man. He is the richest, most powerful monarch in the world, yet Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and more small or little Greek cities had just humbled him. The quest for a new wife and his marriage to Esther is then about the court officials trying to placate a broken king to keep him happy and distracted and also intoxicated. It also explains a little of why this great king seems to be manipulated by the other characters in the book so easily. Also explains why he's got sleepless nights. He's probably got freaking nightmares of Gerald Butler's character in 300 shouting, "Sparta!" Esther is put up to the competition by her uncle Mordecai, who advises her to not tell anyone that she's a Jew. What is extra fascinating about this part of the story is how it contrasts so much to the beginning of Daniel. I already kind of talked about that. Daniel and his friends also become part of the king's court, Nebuchadnezzar's court, but they refuse to eat the court food and do not attempt to hide or change their identity. But here, Esther accepts the non-kosher food and hides her identity when she enters the king's court. This is an example of the oddly un-Jewishness of this Jewish story. Also, in Daniel, he finds favor. Daniel finds favor amongst his fellow eunuchs because of his Jewishness. Here, Esther hides her Jewishness, but also finds favor amongst the eunuchs. She wins the competition and becomes the new queen. And then, last nerdy nugget is that there's 2 plots. And by plot, I mean schemes. Okay? The first plot sees Mordecai uncovering a plot to assassinate the king. Okay? The irony here is that, number one, these plots to kill the king were common in the ancient world, and it was finally an assassination attempt, just like the plot that Mordecai uncovered, that actually resulted in the end of Xerxes' life in 465 BC. So Mordecai is then acknowledged. He overhears 2 eunuchs plotting, and they were promptly executed, and Mordecai's name was recorded as the one who uncovered the plot. And then the second plot that starts in chapter 3 is the heart of this story. It's Haman's plot to kill the Jews. The villain of the story, okay, is now introduced. We could talk about more about his villain character tomorrow. But Haman, we are told, is an Agagite. Okay, that means that he's a descendant of Agag, the Amalekite king whom Saul defeated but did not kill. Okay, but who was then killed by Samuel. This entire story is in 1 Samuel chapter 15. He had been promoted within the court, but Mordecai did not bow down and prostrate himself before him. Hey, this may be connected to the previous plot. Xerxes may not have been aware of Mordecai exactly, but it was likely that Mordecai had at least been awarded a title for finding out about the plot to kill or harm the king. It was thought that he was awarded this Orosanji's title, which means benefactor to the king, which would mean he did not need to prostrate himself before Haman. Anyway, this plot results in Haman wanting to now kill all the Jews. He cast the okay, or the dice to select a day and then manipulate Xerxes to make a decree allowing him to kill the Jews, not mentioning Mordecai and the reasons behind his anger. So he is literally manipulating Xerxes. And the entire rest of the story is now going to unfold. Okay, so these first 3 chapters are designed to give context and to introduce the main plot of the story, which is how in the world are Mordecai and Esther, who are Jews, going to escape this plot to kill their entire people group? And how is Yahweh going to protect his people? He seems to be absent. He seems to be nowhere in the story, which gets us to our timeless truth. And I've written down here, God is most present when he seems the most absent. God's name is nowhere to be found in the book of Esther. However, his activity is everywhere. The book is filled with coincidences. It's filled with all these moments where it's like Mordecai just so happened to hear of a plot to kill the king. Esther just so happened to become the queen for such a time as this. All of these moments that seem serendipitous or seem coincidental are actually God moving things behind the scenes, which means that Yahweh doesn't have to be explicitly present in order to be present. Sometimes he can be absent, or it can seem like he's absent, but really what he's doing is he's moving things behind the scenes in your favor or in my favor or in his people's favor. So those are all the nerdy nuggets I got, and that's our timeless truth for the day. That you may think God's absent, but what if he's present in a way that you're just not used to? What if he's present, but he's present keeping you from dangers that you're not even aware about? What if he's present, but he's just not doing the things that you associate with his presence? Maybe his presence looks different than the box you've placed it in. That's a timeless truth for the day. Tomorrow, we got day 337. We're going to be in Esther chapters 4, 5, and 6. I'm proud of you if you're on a streak. I love you regardless of whether you're not on a streak or not. I'll see you right here, same time, same place, for day 337. Love you guys. Peace. Thanks so much for joining us on the Bible Department podcast. If this episode was helpful, how about you leave a comment, share with a friend, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. To learn more about the show, head to thebibledepartment.com. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.